Hi everyone, and welcome to the second episode of Socium's Tech and Transformation podcast. We will be running this bi-monthly between myself and Will, and we'll be engaging with leaders across the technology industry, discussing a variety of topics and share their thoughts with our network. If you haven't listened yet, then not to worry, but do keep an eye out on our Socium LinkedIn page, as we'll be advertising all future podcasts on there, and you'll be able to view and listen via Spotify and iTunes. And we'll share on LinkedIn as well. Today, I'm joined by Ben Brown, who is the European Head of Engineering for Intuit's QuickBooks brand. I've known Ben for the bulk of my career in recruitment, dating back to his days at Bluefin. He's honestly one of the nicest guys I've come across in the industry, and I've worked quite closely with him over the years to build his engineering teams at a number of his previous companies. So Ben, thank you. How you doing?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Ross, and great. Thank you for the kind words.
No, not to worry. I've given, I guess, a brief intro there to you. But for any of our listeners that haven't come across you before, why don't you give us a brief overview of your background and I guess what it is that you're doing at the moment?
Perfect. Yeah, certainly. So, as you said there, I head up our engineering teams in Europe at Intuit QuickBooks. So I've actually been, I started my career about 15 years ago as an engineer, worked my way up through the roles of kind of tech leads and then into engineering management. And really this is my third engineering team to build, if you like. So I've done that twice before. Fingers crossed, I'm getting better at it each time, learning more each time and making less mistakes each time. But yeah, that's probably a bit about me. In terms of my role here at Intuit, so just to give you a little bit of a background, Intuit is a large global organization employing about 10,000 people across the globe. Intuit actually, you'll better know the QuickBooks brand in the UK, but Intuit across the globe really focuses on two different areas. We have a large proportion of our staff working in the consumer space, and that's really in consumer tax on a product called TurboTax, which is generally North American. And then we have pretty much half of the company focused around our small business space, and that's on the QuickBooks product. And we have a worldwide product for that, but we have a specific product for 7 countries outside the US. I look after our engineering teams in the UK and France, and we're building out product features to enable QuickBooks to be fit for purpose for those local markets, meeting the local compliance needs, meeting those local needs of connections to kind of the local tax office and that sort of thing.
Good, thank you, Ben. It's good, mate. And so far, so good. Obviously, coming up to sort of two years in the business. Been an enjoyable journey so far.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, just over 18 months now. But it seems to go pretty quickly, and I've certainly passed that point in time where you can say you're a newbie and you don't really know things, and now you're the person that you come around and ask questions to.
Good man. So look, it's been a pretty testing time for everyone over the past few months, and I guess a lot of us have had to adapt to a new normal. So today, I want to speak to you, Ben, about what impact the pandemic has had on your team, and I guess what measures you've taken, in order to remain productive during this time. From what I see there's no dodgy lockdown haircut and no visible weight gain from the last few months. But I guess, looking at the wider team and the business, what's been the impact of COVID on the Intuit business? And I guess your team specifically.
Yeah, certainly. I think, good job you can't see the haircut. I certainly have had to take to cutting my own hair, but I've not made too bad a job of it so far. So it's glad that's not noticeable. When we look at it from an Intuit perspective, I think, I think really we've kind of managed to switch to a remote working relatively easily. And I think we always knew for vast parts of our kind of teams, generally in the technology and product space, that would be pretty easy. Most people were working from home on a ad hoc basis anyway, and we kind of had all that technology in place to do that. I think where we perhaps didn't know we could do that was probably in some of our more customer-facing teams. So certainly in sales, it was, hey, how do we create a remote sales team, and not too difficult with that really. And then probably the most difficult team was really in our customer success team. So we work with a number of partners around the globe to provide customer success. And if anybody had said to us, 2 weeks before COVID hit, hey, could you switch everybody to remote within kind of 72 hours? I think everybody would have gone, hey, no, you're crazy. Don't even try and do that. But, luckily we managed to do that with about 72 hours. And generally it's been pretty good. I think what we've learned is, I guess first of all, the moving remotely was probably the easy part of this journey. Actually, it's the moving back that's the more difficult part. Yeah. And really, Intuit's taken a very slow and measured approach to this. We're not in any rush to jump back in the offices. We've proven that we can run the business remotely. So really, we're taking that time to better understand everybody's needs and how we can do that in the right way. I think you work in the tech world, you'll have seen the news from the likes of the kind of Twitters and the Facebooks who've already put kind of statements out there. And, I think in general, we want to move a little bit more slowly and make sure we get it right. But there's obviously pressure, and, my team and my employees are keen to know if we're going to work remotely full time.
Yeah. And what's been the general, I guess, consensus across your team, around returning to the office or the possibility of, I guess, continuing working remotely?
So I think, I'd say the kind of majority of the technology teams are probably enjoying the lockdown and enjoying the kind of remote working a lot more. I'd say it's it's a bit more mixed when it comes to the whole office. I think, some of our teams that thrive off more of that office environment are certainly wanting to kind of get back in the office. And I think it also depends on a little bit on the country as well. So I know our kind of Paris office, which looks after our French market, is a much smaller office. It acts much more like a startup, and therefore that cultural feel of that startup is something they're keen to get. So a lot more people in the Paris office are keen to get back in there and kind of be there. Ultimately, I think we're going to end up in some sort of kind of hybrid model, and I think it's just about getting the details of that working as kind of well as possible.
Yeah, and as it stands at the moment, do you have like a return to office date in mind or not?
So we kind of have a kind of 3-phased approach. Phase 1 being kind of like 10-15% into certain offices. Now, clearly across the globe, we've got offices in different countries, but we've also got offices in different circumstances. So some offices we wholly own, some offices we share with others. Yeah. So really, it's kind of going to depend on kind of those sorts of things. The UK is probably not one of the top ones because we don't own the whole building. It's a little bit harder to control that environment. So probably not going to get back for a while. We did think we might go a little bit kind of, mid kind of July was the original dates that were kind of talked about. But after the kind of more surges in kind of cases, specifically in the US, where, the vast majority of our employees are, has kind of pushed that back a bit. So personally, I don't expect to see an office until 2021, but let's see what happens over the next few months.
No, fair enough. And in terms of, I guess, your team in particular, how are they coping at the moment?
I think generally we moved to remotely working pretty well. I think practical aspects that the teams have had to get used to are, really we focus on this idea of individual Scrum teams working together to achieve goals. And generally for Intuit, that means probably about 4 engineers, a product manager, a designer, as well as an analytics person. And really, those teams have kind of worked out their own working practices. We're fairly loose in terms of how they have to kind of be consistent. So they've worked out how to work, what meetings they need, how to engage. I'm a big kind of fan of things like pair programming, and the teams have had to learn how to do that remotely and learn where that works best. There's certainly the idea of Zoom fatigue, and that is real. So people are struggling with that. When I've asked my teams about productivity, if you like, hey, how are you are you more productive? Are you about the same? Generally, it's about the same or more. We're not seeing too many people who are reporting less, and the people who are reporting less, I think it's probably because of the kind of the lockdown restrictions. So family and children commitments rather than kind of the fact that they're remote. So really, we've tried to take a really individual approach to each person within the teams, work with them to understand what they need to thrive, and then kind of put that in place. So some of our employees who do have those childcare commitments, they're working perhaps shorter hours at the moment or restricted days to make sure that they can do that. But that's just it's just the right thing to do, and it's the right thing to kind of get people through this process. But generally things going pretty well. Really proud of how the team have come through this. And to be honest, it's not changed our kind of ways of working too much. I'm very mindful of that idea that I've heard the advice that going to remote, almost the worst thing you can do is just try and copy exactly what you did in the office. So that's a little, I feel like a little bird in the back of my mind constantly reminds me that. So we've tried to tweak things where we need to, but it hasn't caused too many issues. We're just going through things like our year-end process at the moment. We've tweaked that slightly for a remote world. We've taken away the pressure of having an underperforming rating because we felt that was too much to put on people in a situation which is far from normal. So we've kind of, we've decided to focus on positive ratings with people and if there are people who we felt were in that underperforming rating, just working with them a little bit rather than giving them that title, which might cause extra stress.
Yeah. You mentioned there about productivity, and I think that's been a key area of focus for a lot of businesses and leaders during this time while they haven't had that face-to-face time with people. How do you guys measure productivity, and has that changed since lockdown?
So I think, my philosophy is certainly one of trust and I honestly don't care how many hours somebody takes to do something as long as the things get done. So we're measuring the output of the teams and kind of what's getting delivered. I couldn't care less how long that takes and kind of how people manage to fit that in. I think the one piece we are saying is there's certainly a situation where some people are struggling to turn off. So when work and home have become blended together, they're really struggling with the idea of how do I turn off? How do I get that break? How do I move away from that? One of the areas we really are focused in on is how can we prevent that burnout that's going to come from that at some stage. I think I'm trying that with role modeling. So I had a week off 3 weeks ago. Clearly that was before anything lifted in terms of restrictions. So I stayed at home. I did some different things. I did a few jobs around the house, but generally, I just tried to switch off from work, and it was a welcome rest, and it was a kind of a welcome break for my brain. It's tough though when people clearly want to use their holiday to go on holiday, and they can't.
Yeah, no, I think that's been I think something we've tried to do as a team as well is really try and enforce that. We appreciate that the holiday maybe isn't the holiday that you would have ideally liked, but it's still one that's going to be rewarding, beneficial, and needed. I know for myself, I've spent 20 hours a day locked in my bedroom because I've got 2 young kids downstairs, and it can get on top of you at times. So I think that break is vitally important. I stress that to anyone who's working from home at this moment in time. Yeah. I guess is there any? I guess in terms of you run forgive me if I'm wrong. The team size there is sort of circa 30. Is that right?
Yeah, so we've probably got somewhere in the region of about 20, early 20s in London, and then about 10 engineers in our Paris office.
Yeah, and so obviously, I guess of those, obviously they're not all direct reports to you, but of the ones that are, how are you? How have you gone about managing them during this period? I
think in many ways, a lot hasn't changed. So keep those regular touch points in, keep those regular one-to-ones. I think it's important to let the employee in many ways dictate that one-to-one. It's their time. They can kind of say, hey, look, I'd love to talk about this. I'd love to talk about that. I think, regular contact with people generally through Slack, because it's just easier to fit around, doesn't cause the Zoom fatigue, but generally checking in with people every few days. I think one of the things that I've really valued with the whole team is, Intuit is very passionate about people being able to be their whole selves at work and being able to talk openly about that and being able to be, for want of a better word, psychologically safe in that environment. And so through things like my team meetings, some of the things we've been doing is, I think last time we did set your background to be the CD cover from the first single that you bought, or for those who are too young, a Spotify album cover or whatever. But just to kind of bring that out and just to kind of talk a little bit about people. And it was really interesting to just hear people talk about that. We've done, tell me the one thing you've learned about lockdown that you're going to keep doing after lockdown. And then really in the first one, we also did hey, introduce me to your remote working space. So take me on a tour of where you work, because frankly, I'm probably going to see the same background for a while. I'm probably going to wonder, hey, what's that weird thing you've got sat over your right shoulder? And, perhaps if I give you that opportunity to just explain it, talk about it, tell me if you're likely to get kids running in, if you've got a dog or a cat that's going to jump around, and then that just adds to you be you. So I think spending that time, I've spent much less time in things like our team meetings doing what might be considered to be business updates or kind of just passing on information, and more about getting to know the team and getting to kind of feel closer to them.
Yeah, it's strange, isn't it, that you can get to know individuals probably better than you would do in this environment than normally. I know from many of the guys who work in your team, Intuit is a great place to work. You guys are forever on the list of great places to work in the UK. I think you sort of touched upon it there. But what have you done as a team to sort of maintain that culture during this time?
Yeah, no. So yeah, good question. We're certainly very proud of those awards. Number 4 this year in a great place to work, and number 2 in technology. So great, great that we managed to kind of keep that going. I think what's very interesting is our Glassdoor rating has also increased during the kind of lockdown, which is something that clearly we love the fact that that's the case, but it perhaps not what people would otherwise expect. So I think really, a lot of people talk about the importance of communication and perhaps how you have to communicate more. So as an organisation, we instigated very early on a kind of a weekly all hands. And that's an opportunity where we do some presentations, some kind of share outs, but we also give an opportunity for people to ask questions. And that's anonymous, open, as kind of difficult questions as you want to possibly ask. The leadership team are there to kind of answer those and to kind of make that happen. Intuit has a policy whereby, we have our own, what we call, I guess, way of working out what to do, and we call this design for delight, and it's our way of kind of building up processes or building ways of thinking. And design for delight is really, we use it on our external products, so we use it to decide, hey, what should we build in our QuickBooks app for solving customer problems, but we also use it for our internal processes to understand how can we be better at what we do. And the three kind of aspects to design for delight. First one is deep customer empathy. So on an internal basis, your customer is your employees. So really start to understand their pains. We put a lot of focus on things like interviews. So talking to people, asking them questions, also just observing, seeing what's happening. So, hey, I'm not going to ask you questions here. Just show me how you do a process. Just show me what you do and show me why it's a pain. We then go into an idea of like brainstorming. That's the second principle of D4D. We call it go broad to go narrow. And then the third principle is this idea of rapid experimentation. So we've done that with things like the all hands. We got something out there. We then got some feedback. We then asked employees what we should change about that. One of the things they said was, hey, let's have a different presenter every week. It can get a little bit boring if it's the same person. Hey, let's shorten it a little bit because it was too long at an hour. Let's make it 45 minutes or a little bit shorter. So we've kind of taken on that feedback and done that sort of thing.
Nice. Sorry, Ben, I'll cut you off. Go on, continue, mate.
No, I was just going to say that's probably the main things we've started to do is do that more of that communication. And then I think we've been very deliberate about thinking through other things. So as a leadership team in the UK, we set aside 2 days a quarter to go on an offsite, for want of a better word. Now, clearly, can't go offsite at the moment, so we've had to work out how we go remote about that. Every year, we also hold what we call a get-together with the employees at the start of our fiscal year to really launch the fiscal year, talk about our strategy, help people to understand that. Again, we've had to kind of tweak that for COVID, for the remote world, but still do as much as we possibly can and keep that fun there. An interesting aspect that's come out of this, I know a lot of people have done Zoom quizzes. Now we have a weekly quiz at 4 p.m. on a Friday, which is just a really nice end to the weekend. We used to have in the office there was a drinks fridge that opened at 4 p.m. on a Friday. That's now replicated with a quiz. You can bring your own drink, and we just do a bit of socializing for the end of the week. So it's a nice kind of end for the week.
And if I remember rightly, there's Intuit pretty good as a business and put on some pretty impressive parties, whether it be summer or Christmas parties. I guess you're going to have to postpone the summer one, but maybe the Christmas one for that matter. But I've heard very good reports about those. Yeah, we certainly do. Yeah, I say that the summer one is normally what we call a get-together event, which happens. It's planned for about 3 weeks' time in August. Yeah. Clearly we won't be doing anything there, but we're exploring what we can do remotely. What options can we do to make that as fun in people's homes as it did. Our customer is small businesses.
We had a town hall and all hands with our the leader of the small business segment in Intuit, a guy called Alex Chris. He did that remotely from the US, and we actually sent out a small brownie square from one of the small businesses that works on that uses QuickBooks out to everybody across the whole of the UK. So, knock on the door, DHL comes in, I get a little brownie square, and it's like, oh, it's a really it's a really nice touch. So I think that's those sorts of things are really nice things for people to get.
Yeah, definitely. So if you're looking at the wider business at the moment, what's been the impact that, I guess, what impact has it had on, or COVID in particular had on, the business plans, and I guess your ideas and plans for the team this year?
Yeah, so I think the first things first is that Intuit's had a very resilient business, and we saw this during the last downturn, and this downturn has been no different. So the good news is our business hasn't fallen off the cliff that a lot of other organizations have really suffered from with lockdowns, especially things like the travel industry and areas of hospitality. So, when we hit the worst times, we were probably seeing our growth slow down to 0 or near 0 rather than drop off a cliff and go 20-30% negative. So that was really reassuring and kind of positive. Because our customers are small businesses, clearly there's an impact on small businesses. We've tried to do as much as we possibly can to support them. We've done that through discounts through the kind of initial months to help them kind of survive those months. We've done that by providing extra advice, and we provide a microsite which helps to provide advice to all small businesses about, hey, what options are there out there for my help and support? All these CBILS and the other kind of loans that the government provide are not exactly simple things to understand. So where we can kind of make that as simple as possible and as remove the complexity. So now the last few weeks we're starting to see the kind of green shoots. We're starting to see more people come back into QuickBooks, more people start buying the product, and really that's I think it just kind of matches the unlocking of businesses and the way that things have started to kind of turn back on. So, we're still going to hopefully have a great year for our kind of FY20. Just not going to be quite as big as it was before. I think we'd love to do, before a lot of COVID happens, we were looking to do a lot of kind of growth, especially in our European region. I think that's probably been tempered a little bit by kind of COVID, and as Intuit's been in a good position to not have to shrink the organization overall, which is a damaging event. And our CEO has been very clear to say, that I'm not going to make short-term decisions that are there to meet a number. It's about the longer-term strategy. Clearly, hiring and firing and hiring engineers again is a difficult thing. It gets remembered a long time, and it isn't something that you kind of want to go in openly. So for the moment, things are, I think we're starting to kind of come through the worst parts, hopefully, and that means we can start to think about the reinvestment at that stage. But clearly, as cases start to rise, we need to start seeing, exactly how that pans out from an economic basis.
And I know you mentioned that any future growth is, something still under consideration, but I believe you have managed to add someone to the team. Is that right? During this time, how did that process work? And I guess what was done differently to what would happen in slightly more normal times?
Yeah, sure. So we actually introduced a couple of grads into the scheme, a couple of interns into our team. So we originally set out to do an internship program for the summer. We probably employed a lot of these people back in December, January. So they've been confirmed for a long time. We didn't want to go down the route of you've been looking forward for this for so long. You've set it all up. You've possibly turned down other offers. Hey, we're not doing it anymore. So we really wanted to commit to doing it. We committed quite early to a remote-only program. Even before people knew whether we would still be back in the offices or not, we decided to not have the interns have to commit to finding accommodation in London if they weren't based in London, to all the kind of costs associated with that. So we kind of said, hey, look, we'll just go remote. That's the best way to do things. So I got 2 interns who've recently joined my team, Petra and Usman. They are getting on well. They've kind of We brought them into one of those Scrum teams. They're kind of pairing with everybody on a daily basis. They've been able to get in there and start committing code in the first few days. So I think it's worked so far. But really, it's about that kind of close working and collaboration. Personally, I've had one-to-ones with both of them and really tried to make that all about, hey, look, let's get to know each other a little bit better, dig into their lives a little bit more, really understand them. And I think it's really nice to learn about them as human beings and as people, rather than just a worker on your team. And then being very open about, hey, what questions have you got? What do you want to know about the way we do things? So yeah, all good so far. I think it helps that we have a relatively robust onboarding process when we're in the office anyway, and making that go remote was a relatively simple thing. So I'm sure our IT support people are sat at home with 20 MacBook Pros sat in a corner that they're kind of waiting to ship out, but it still seems to work. Things still get out on time, and things still people still start well on that first morning.
And what's the feedback from those guys been? Because joining any business whereby you haven't met the people face to face, you haven't seen the environment within which you work, can prove pretty daunting. So what's the feedback been from those guys as to how that experience has been?
Yeah, I mean, I think it generally very positive, and generally it's they've really appreciated the people first focus that we have at Intuit. Now, clearly, a lot of them don't have that much to compare it to, or perhaps have done a couple of other internships and things. So, one of the things I've been reinforcing to them is that, hey, look, I'm glad you're enjoying it, but you will find this isn't necessarily normality. So some organizations are better than others in terms of the way they kind of look after people, and you need to learn that in some ways, and probably you'll only do that by seeing, but just remember that, because it's something that's important. And if you enjoy that, then look for that sort of company when you do come to graduate.
Look, we're I forget how long it's been now. It's been that long, but I'd estimate we're sort of 3 months down the line, to this process. What's worked well, and maybe what hasn't worked so well for you during this period?
Yeah, so I think the in general, what's worked well is the teams are still able to deliver great value, and they managed to do that kind of by removing most of their stuff that they do remotely. I think where I'm probably constructively dissatisfied is we still haven't really been able to make that move to an asynchronous model as I would like to do. There's still too many things that we probably have to do as meetings. We still haven't quite worked out how to kind of make that a bit more asynchronous, and the Zoom fatigue piece will start to come in with people. So I'm still constructively dissatisfied with that. Want to try and make some improvements where we can think about being less dependent on meetings, and that being the first option that pops up. Hey, let's have a meeting on that. Tells me there's something wrong, if you like. It's, hey, how can we solve this without a meeting first? And then, okay, last resort, let's have a meeting.
And I think that's a sentiment that's echoed probably by 90% of the people I've spoken to during this period. Is there any ideas that you can share at this stage that would be a way of improving that situation?
I think one of the interesting things is I think we're learning the importance of being able to write well. And I think it's interesting that skill set could become something that's kind of more valued and more relied upon as a communication method, because ultimately, Slack being Slack, we tend to use that a lot like we would use any other instant messenger, which tends to be not grammatically correct, very chucked down sentences, whatever it happens to be. And I think there's certain things where I think people are learning the value of being able to communicate through written words. So I think that's certainly something that's been interesting. If you can nail that through a document that people can read, even if you do need to meet, that meeting becomes more about the discussion rather than the presenting the idea. And I think the other thing is, in that meeting where you have it, real strong facilitation skills from the leader of that meeting, facilitator of that meeting, because otherwise it's very difficult. If it's 20 people sat on a call just listening to one person go on for 20 minutes, it's probably not of great value. So how can you facilitate a meeting? How can you do that? We've started using a lot of tools. So we use a tool called Mural, which is like an online, one of a better word, whiteboard. So you can pretty much draw on it what you like. You can stick sticky notes on it. You can kind of dump images, text into it, those sorts of things. And that I've really seen the benefit teams have got from being able to do the kind of things they would do on their own whiteboards in the office. That go a little bit further beyond something like what you do in Trello, which might be more like just some tasks, but they actually it can be a bit more creative, it can be a bit more designed. So I've certainly seen the benefit of something like that. I've always been a big advocate of physical boards in my offices for teams, and that's probably started to make me think, hey, maybe this whole physical board thing, maybe there's something to replicate it, which isn't something I've found before.
So you mentioned there about a few new sort of tools that you and the team are using to sort of replicate, I guess, a formal office environment. I think a lot of the articles that I've read, over the past few months have been talking a lot about digital transformation being really accelerated because of COVID. Are there any examples that you can give from Intuit where that's the case?
Well, I think the biggest one is probably just the way our customer success teams have had to go much more remote. So that's it's a very big change, but it's also part of our journey at Intuit to move towards this idea of really the last resort should be needing to reach out and phone somebody. It should just be either obvious in the product or very easy to get that kind of help and support. So I'd say that's something that's probably sped up a lot. I think the second thing is, so as a company, we've moved more into this space of understanding this, what we call kind of virtual experts. So in the US, we have a product where essentially small companies can pay on a subscription basis for a bookkeeper to do their books in QuickBooks, and it's kind of managed through QuickBooks as a service. So you pay X amount of dollars a month, and you get kind of the hours to do your books. I think we see this is a sector that's kind of going to really speed up, because the move to virtual has really kind of said, hey, look, this is all possible. Everybody's done it, and you can see people really wanting that idea of, hey, look, why do I need to go and find a physical accountant? Why do I need to go and find a physical bookkeeper? Why do I need to go and find a physical person to go and run my payroll? Perhaps I can just sign up for a service for one of those. And I think that's certainly an area we can see accelerating over the next couple of years.
Nice. I think a lot of employees, but also a lot of employers are looking ahead to see how things might change or stay the same, over this period. What do you anticipate will be happening at Intuit and in your team? When I guess when we're sort of back in the more normal way of life.
I think we'll have the first one, the obvious one is, I think we'll have a much greater balance between office time and kind of working from home time. I certainly don't think the office is dead now. I certainly don't think we won't be spending time there, but I certainly think it will be less time. And therefore, I think we're going to have to think up new and inventive ways to get the office cultural pieces done. I'm a fan of a lot of the writings around some companies like Basecamp, who talk a lot about the kind of remote working culture. And, I know they do a lot more in terms of, I think they run a 6 monthly offsite where they get everybody in the same room to kind of build those bonds, to do the kind of that element of things. So I can certainly see that being a different aspect. And I think that probably also, if we get that right, allows us to open up a greater talent pool across the globe. Now, clearly, I think the easiest thing for us to do is to potentially make it anybody on a similar time zone or even a similar country is the easiest possible. As you start to branch out into other countries, it gets a little bit more difficult. Whether we'll ever get to the kind of, hey, look, here's teams made up of people from around the globe, I'm not 100% sure on that. I think there's still a great benefit in the teams being able to communicate and talk and on a relatively similar time zone. We certainly struggle with some of the engagements we have to have. They're slower with teams in our US offices and our India offices, and That's the main cause of that is just time. When your day ends and you drop a message in Slack, their day starts and you don't find out till the next day. So that's just a practicality. So I think it's certainly see those sorts of aspects changing. I hope this allows us. One of the things we talked about as a UK leadership team for QuickBooks was, hey, how can we continue, if you like, doing the right thing by our health and our family, which probably was, if you like, suffering, for want of a better word, when we were going through the hours of commuting, when we were doing all the other things. I think that strikes me as the one thing that everybody's learned is that, hey, wouldn't it be great if we could spend more time together as families? Wouldn't it be better if we didn't have to do that commute every day? So, my greatest hope is that we can continue to do that and that we don't forget about that. And I know we'll make concerted effort at Intuit to do that, but I hope in general the world realizes that that's we've learned something valuable there, so let's not throw it all away.
Yeah. You've obviously, we spoke before in the introduction about this you've led numerous engineering teams of varying sizes at a number of companies over the past. But within this specific situation, what have been, I guess, your sort of key learnings from this period?
Yeah, the obvious one, while I used to know we could do remote on an ad hoc basis, I never really was sure we could do remote, and this forced experiment has kind of confirmed we can. So I'm now very much converted to kind of that model. I think that in itself then opens certain things like all of my talent has to come from London, because that just so happens to be the place that pulls in the talent and people come here to work for the big companies that are in London. I think that's an interesting one. I'm not a Londoner myself. I'm from the north. I'm from Sheffield, and I'd love to be able to reach out to talent in different areas, which helps us to be a little bit more diverse still as an organisation. So I think that kind of opens that aspect up. I think it's also it's probably made me think about, are there different skills that I would hire for? And I think overall, I'd probably come to the conclusion that in general, no. I think the only thing, as we talked about earlier, is maybe on that writing side, we need to think about, in terms of written communication, is that an important thing, and do we need to do more to kind of understand that before somebody joins the team? And then I think we've still got a lot of learning to do, which is probably about for want of a better word, the hybrid phase, or the next phase when we start to go into that. That's where I expect to probably learn a bit more about what the future can hold, and quite how easy it's going to be to go fully remote versus always needing an office versus somewhere in between.
Should you be looking to grow the team, say, later on this year? You mentioned there that the likelihood is you're not going to be back in the office till next year. How are you going to change the interview process to ensure they have all the information they need to be able to make an informed decision as to whether Intuit is the place for them moving forward?
I think in terms of the main interview process, generally things can stay relatively the same. I think we've got a pretty good process. I think what we might have to add to that is more So I would often, after an interview, take people to a look around the floor of where the team worked, to see what the teams were doing, to that sort of thing. Now, I can certainly see that to replicate that virtually, clearly I can't take you for a walk around everybody's house. Maybe what I can do is you can join a stand-up or two for a team, or you can understand how the team work. Because ultimately, a lot of people have debated what's the best way to interview somebody. And in reality, I think we all know the best way to find out whether somebody can do the job is to get them to do the job and then judge whether they're good at doing it. The thing that makes that hard is that clearly you can't go and work on another job while you've also got a job, and the practicalities of that. So if you can get them as close to that team as possible and as close to understanding what happens, then that helps to fill some of the gaps. I think, certainly, one of the key things I think helped us to attract great talent was we do have a lovely office. So it's going to be interesting to see that that no longer can kind of act as such a great pull, because you might not see it as often, or you might not see it for a little while. So it'd be interesting to see what the impact of that is. Mm-hmm. I think we've always hired for the right people, and always had this idea of a really strong. I I guess, no assholes policy, as it's trying to describe with people. That's, that's really what we're aiming to do. And I think that in many ways becomes even stronger. In many ways, what I think is going to be hard is that the person who's being hired is probably going to be the first time they take a job without seeing an office as well. So I think it's also, first of all, accepting that, and then secondly, working them through that change process, because it's going to be weird. Yeah, whenever anybody does that, they're used to what they're used to have done. And ironically, it might be easier at the more junior end of the spectrum where people haven't got that ingrained, hey, this is how we do interviews. Well, if interviews are just remote from the start, then nobody's going to know the difference.
And I guess on a away from the interview, we're seeing lockdown restrictions being eased by the week at the moment. What are you most looking forward to getting stuck into?
Well, I think a couple of things really. So,
I know you like your holidays.
Yeah. So I mean, travel and food are the two things really. But I was reflecting on this the other day with somebody that I do a relatively large amount of travel personally, but I also I travel a lot with work as well. Having a team in France and a head office in the US, I do a relatively large amount of business travel. This is probably the longest time I've slept in one bed for quite a long time. Not being able to go and travel and do something else. So sleeping in your home for a while is great, but it's it's a little bit strange. So probably looking forward to going to some nice hotels, seeing something like that. But then, as you know, I'm a big foodie, so really can't wait to go and eat some lovely meals. But I'm in no rush. I'm also not. Part of the enjoyment of eating the meal is the atmosphere and the way that it kind of feels, not just the food. So I'm in no rush to go into an environment that feels unsafe, odd, or not relaxing. So that will come when it comes.
Have you got is there a number one on the list of restaurants you're looking to head to once this is all done?
There's never a number one, but there's always plenty of opportunities. So I'm trying to think. I mean, I think my next big, if you like, big splurge or next big thing is probably something like Raymond Blanc's Le Manoir.
Very nice.
I'd love to go there, but that's kind of I don't know. That's a big birthday or big anniversary style place. So you got to kind of save that up for something nice.
Good. Well, look, Ben, I know you're an incredibly busy man, so I won't keep you much longer. I just want to say thank you. Thanks for joining the Socium Tech and Transformation podcast. You've been a great guest. So thank you very much. And to everyone else, I hope you guys have all found it interesting. And keep an eye out for future podcasts from us over the next few months. Cheers, then.
Thanks for having me, Ross. It's been great.
No worries, mate.